Hi everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar brought to you by the Canadian Professional Sales Association. I can see that we still have some attendees joining us, so we'll just get started in a few minutes.
All right. Rupalin, are we ready to get rolling for an intro?
The Canadian Professional Sales Association. Please note that you will be able to ask questions at the end of our session using the Q&A function. We'll try our best to answer all questions within our allotted time. You also have access to a fact sheet for this webinar on using social media to attract leads. Feel free to download this from the handout section in your dashboard. Today's webinar will give you insight on how to build relationships and generate business leads with social selling. Hosting today is Shane Gibson, an international speaker and author on social selling, sales performance, and social media marketing, who's addressed over 100,000 people on stages in North America, Southern Africa, India, Dubai, Malaysia, and South America. Shane Gibson is number 5 on the Forbes.com list of the top 30 social salespeople in the world. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Shane to start.
Thank you, Rupalin. It's great to join everybody this morning. It's 8 a.m. here in Vancouver on a Monday morning in downtown, and it's actually a rare non-rainy day today, so I'm pretty excited. Today, we're going to talk about how to track new leads with social selling. And I think I'll give you a little background on myself on how I got into this space. So when I got involved with social media, and I wrote 2 books a little over now 6 years ago, one called Sociable, one called Guerrilla Social Media Marketing. And when I wrote those books on social media, it wasn't like I woke up one day and said, hey, I'd like to be known as a guy who talks about social selling and social media, and this is where I want my brand to be. What actually occurred is I'm a sales trainer and a sales strategist, have been for 20 years, and I was just using these tools to grow my own business, because social selling, in my opinion, is an incredible guerrilla marketing tool. And guerrilla marketing, instead of using a lot of money and a lot of resources, we in essence achieve conventional goals using unconventional means. So instead of spending a lot of time and energy, we actually use a lot of creativity, innovation, and community to achieve our business results. And so I was just using social media to grow my own business when a lot of my clients asked me, hey, Shane, would you mind sharing with us how we found you? How did we Google you and we landed your website, we watched a video, we connected with you on Twitter, and we created this dialogue, and next thing you know, you're in our office and we're doing business. We want to learn how to do that. So I, in essence, was somewhat of a reluctant social selling expert or strategist. That is something that sort of evolved as I saw the need and as the tools evolved. And for me, I really have always looked at social media through a sales lens. And so what I'm going to share with you is this process of how I've learned and how I've worked with my clients how to attract leads using social selling. So here's the $26 billion question. Why did Microsoft buy LinkedIn? So LinkedIn was purchased for $26 billion by Microsoft a little over 2 years ago. And here's the answer straight from the mouth of the CEO of Microsoft. He says it helps us differentiate our CRM product with social selling. It helps us take dynamics into new spaces like human capital management with recruiting and learning and talent management. So here's something really interesting. This is the CEO of Microsoft, and what he leads with, he does talk about human capital management and recruiting and learning, but first he leads with social selling. And we're seeing that now LinkedIn is being deeply integrated with all the Microsoft tools and CRM because they realize that that's a massive competitive advantage. And so this is the CEO of Microsoft spending $26 billion on LinkedIn because they're betting on the continued growth of social selling. So let's define social selling. What is it? So there's a whole bunch of different ways people talk about social selling. Some people see it as a way for you to spam your client base for free. Others think of social selling as, you know, gratuitously taking selfies of oneself at conferences and promoting it to your audience to position yourself. And yet really, if we look at social, it implies a two-way communication, bidirectional. And when I look at selling, how I like to define selling is about creating an environment where an act of faith can take place. So social selling, if you combine these two things, is the act of using online bidirectional communications and conversations to create that environment where an act of faith can take place. And that act of faith is really about permission to sell to, communicate to. It opens the door to a first meeting. It opens the door to a trial or a demo of a product. And so this is really what we're trying to do. In most cases, I find that people in person, salespeople in person, close too late. They don't ask for the business soon enough. But in social media, they do the opposite. Most salespeople ask for the business too soon. They sort of forget that they're trying to establish an environment where an act of faith can take place and build trust. And that happens through two-way communication and adding value. So let's look at these platforms quickly. I think this number is outdated. I believe it's over 500 million now. So every time I update this number, it was 415 million this time about 8 months ago. Then it was 450 million about a month ago when I did this deck, and I just believe that it's now close to 500 million active users on LinkedIn today. And so LinkedIn represents every major Fortune 500, every non-government organization. 50% of all university grads in the United States and Canada will graduate with a LinkedIn profile. And it's now also becoming an incredible hub for content, a very rich hub for content and content marketing. So then we've got platforms like Facebook. So Facebook represents, of course, 1.4 billion active users on any given day. So that's an incredible number of unique users. And what I love about LinkedIn, or about Facebook, is it can operate a lot like LinkedIn. Now, not all of us have this enabled, but about half the people I talk to have this enabled, which is Facebook Graph Search. So I can search for something like my friend's friends who work at Oracle, and it'll give me a list of second-degree connections. And then maybe there's this recruiter for Oracle that this is the one I want to connect with. I can add a mutual connection for an introduction. So the reality is, even just from a networking perspective, Facebook is also a very rich platform for second-degree interactions, for instance, and introductions. So we often look at LinkedIn as this platform, but Facebook also provides us incredible access to other decision makers and storytelling opportunities. Then, of course, Twitter is 500 million updates a day. And Twitter is, for the first time in the last year, has begun to grow again, and engagement is spiked significantly. So is profitability. You know, some people would give a lot of that credit to Donald Trump, which I would say it has to, because it's kind of like it's kind of like a bit of a train wreck where we can't look away. We don't want to look. We can't look away. And people are on their daily looking at news. But what also is occurring is they're adding a whole bunch of new tools and filters and making it more relevant again. And so what I like about Twitter, which is something that most people don't use, is it's hard to kind of see here, but what I've done is if you go to twitter.com/search, you can click on a little advanced button, and then you can search within a certain geographical location. So for instance, if I was selling eco tours in Vancouver, and I was selling eco kayak tours to people locally, and I wanted to find new clients who are interested in kayaking, I can simply just search for the term kayaking near Vancouver, and I see all the tweets and updates done by individuals in this area who are talking about kayaking. Then I can reach out to those individuals by following them, interacting with them, engaging them, not pitching, and begin to establish rapport with them. So this is kind of a quick example of what you could even do with Twitter. And so what's powerful about Twitter isn't the fact that there are 500 million updates a day. It's the fact that you can drill down and find 20 updates today in your neighborhood which are relevant to you and your business. I also use it to follow conference hashtags that I'm not at. So if I'm not at the Salesforce.com conference last month, but I want to connect with everyone who's there, I can follow that hashtag, follow those individuals, interact and ask them questions, and actually identify prospects and opportunities and relationships without leaving my office. So it's a pretty powerful tool. So Instagram, of course, is 95 million photos and videos per day. And very much like I described Twitter, the powerful thing about Instagram is the ability to look at updates both from geography and hashtags that would be relevant to your demographic or audience, and then being able to reach out, like their content, ask them questions, interact, and establish rapport is another great tool. So I just sort of introduced this quickly, and those are some quick examples of how some people may use these platforms. But what's interesting is that this study done by a Sales Guy Incorporated, our Consulting Inc., and Kite Desk out of the US. And they did it 2 years in a row in 2014 and 2015. CPSA and myself have done a survey across Canada on social selling use in Canada, which came to very similar a very similar result as to this study. But here's what they've said. In a 3-month study of 500 plus sales pros in the B2C and B2B marketing space, they found that salespeople with social media aptitude were 6 times more likely to exceed quota than those with moderate or minimal social media use and competency. And we found in our study that over 80% of sales professionals that use social media on a daily basis in Canada meet or exceed their quota. So very interesting. So one of the aspects that's really important in social selling is, if we're in social sales, is what does it really mean, or what's our goal? So for me, my goal is 2 things. Often we think of social selling, we think of prospecting. Boy, I can go on LinkedIn, I can scrape LinkedIn for data, and I can now get the direct contact information for CEOs, executives, decision makers, whoever I'm targeting. So that's true. That's one part of social selling. But what happens after you connect with them? What happens after you make a LinkedIn request, say you'd like to connect, and then they're not ready to buy today, or the relationship isn't at the point where you can pitch them? So what occurs is that, number one, we need to establish and position ourselves as a thought leader so that not only are we reaching out to people, but people are reaching out to us. We've got a magnetic brand. We're seen as a resource, as an advocate, as a thought leader in the space that we're selling in versus just a pitch artist or an order taker. So there's 3 things that we need to become a thought leader. And this is a lot. Most of my business, I can cold call really well. Did it for years. Rarely do it anymore. One of the reasons why is I've built a strong enough thought leadership brand using social media that most of my leads and inquiries come in directly through my connections or as a referral from them or people who found my content. So let's talk about what this looks like. Number one, great sales thought leaders, they create or curate relevant content. That means you find a great article. Let's say you're in the capital equipment business and you're selling capital equipment for the food processing industry. And so you may find an article about how to run a factory better using lean startup principles. And so you might find that article, you haven't written it, but you're sharing it to your LinkedIn, you're sharing it to Twitter, you're sharing it to Facebook. You might personally even email it off to a couple clients who would find it relevant. And the idea is you're sharing content that's relevant to your audience based upon your area of expertise. You may also write a LinkedIn blog post on that topic as well and push that out to your audience. But the key factor here is great thought leaders and magnetic marketers or sales professionals create and curate relevant content within their area of expertise. And so that's the first part. But it's not the be-all, end-all of social selling or social media marketing. And this is the challenge, is most people just create content and think that that's enough, that I have an opinion and the world is entitled to it. Here's my blog post. But that's only one part. And so that's not enough to establish yourself as a thought leader. In many cases, that might not be enough to actually take those people who are interested in your content and move them into actually being relationships that eventually become clients. So the next step is that we need to have relevant, engaging conversations. And this is the thing most people are missing. They connect and they pitch. Versus relevant, engaging conversations is you're connected on LinkedIn to 22 great prospects who you want to do business with in the next 90 days or 6 months. And what you do is on a weekly basis, you check their LinkedIn updates and see which ones you can comment on, interact, ask questions, or create opportunities to interact with them through personal messaging. And so what happens is that this back and forth dialogue and interaction begins to put us top of mind, but it also builds rapport, not unlike going to a networking function where you don't go right to business. In most cases, you're going back and forth, asking questions, talking about the weather, asking general questions about the industry, establishing a commonality, and then the card comes out saying, hey, let me give you my card. Hey, fantastic. And next thing you know, we follow up, we book an appointment, we meet with them. But the whole point in here is that we don't go right from saying hello to stuffing our card in their face and asking for an appointment. We need to build that rapport first. So that dialogue is an important piece. Also, many of us have dialogue that's on LinkedIn or on Twitter that's public. So your dialogue with prospects actually becomes your personal marketing as well, because their connections become aware of it. Then the next piece is we build community. So there's contribution and networking are two parts of building community. And so find ways to do things that are bigger than yourself. So part of that is not just sharing your company's sales updates, but actually sharing articles and insights that would be useful for people. It may be hosting an online webinar and bringing in a thought leader, a subject matter expert, and then inviting your clients in and adding value that way. It may just be having, literally building community, might be posting a daily question on LinkedIn and creating dialogue with your connections that adds value beyond just what you're selling. But just finding opportunities to build community. What CPSA is doing today with this webinar is building community. They're pulling together their members and they're adding value. They're not selling you anything today. They're actually doing something to pull people together and give value. So what we need to look at from our social selling strategy, because we talk about the fact that great social sellers share great content, that's true, but most are missing the conversations and the community building, and that's why they're not pulling leads towards them. And so yes, be proactive, but also think about how you can position yourself as a thought leader in your space. So I mentioned the fact that the average salesperson pitches too soon on the internet. And part of it is they're ignorant of these 5 steps. Ignorant in the most endearing way. I mean, they just don't understand it. They haven't been shared, and it's different than maybe what intuitively it looks like. But these are the steps most B2B and actually even B2C buyers make as they move through the online sales funnel before they even enter your sales funnel or give you permission to sell, pitch, or build a relationship. So Jay Conrad Levinson, and Jay is the author of the Guerrilla Marketing series of books, which sold 25 million books to date. Him and I developed this model together. And what we looked at was what's the process that your customer goes through. So the first step is discovery. They're going to discover you. Now, the first way to discover is that you proactively reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed your update on this topic on LinkedIn, found it really interesting and thought we should connect because I think there may be opportunities for us to collaborate your business together in the future. So that's an example of discovery. But also they may discover you through you sharing a great piece of content and one of their connections interacting with it. They may discover you by Googling for a local business that does what you do and you show up in Google Places. They may also discover you through just one of your tweets through Twitter search. So at some point they're going to discover you and or your brand. Then the next step is consumption. They're going to read your tweet, they're going to read your blog post, they're going to download your case study, whatever it might be, and at that point that causes an interaction because you see the fact they've liked it, they've commented, they've downloaded your white paper. And then once that interaction happens, and that interaction often means dialogue. So we don't just go right to connecting, we often ask them a few questions, go back and forth, establish some rapport. And this may go on for a period of time until there's a connection where they follow us on Twitter, they connect on LinkedIn, they submit their email address, or possibly we move them to a quick Skype call, video call, a phone call. And then from there, we move into consent, where they give us permission to market to them. And it's not, or sell to them. And not all consent is equal. So some people give us consent around the area of, hey, I'd like to learn more about your business. So they might subscribe to our newsletter or give us permission to send them monthly updates on what's going on in the industry. Or it might be consent to build a relationship. Hey, I'd like to get to know you a bit better. Let's connect for a coffee. Let's hop on a Skype call. Or it might be consent to sell. And that's often comes in the form of a question, such as, you know, how does your software work? How could that impact my business? Will this make a difference? How long does it take to implement? These are consensual questions that say, hey, you've got permission to sell to me. And at that point, that's where the pitch starts, not at discovery. And so if we can look at these stages and then think, how could my online activity, the content I share, and the things I do help accelerate this process and move people through it? So the first step is credibility. And imagine if you saw this guy walking around a networking function at your local Board of Trade, Chamber of Commerce, or industry event. He'd have a pretty hard time networking and connecting with people. And yet, this is really the profile of a lot of people I see on the internet who sell. It blows my mind. I met a senior insurance salesperson recently who admitted that their prospecting efforts and the ability and networking was difficult for them. The stuff they used to do, where they'd pick up the phone and cold call or network at functions, wasn't working, and that they really felt that maybe social selling would be something that could be to their benefit. And when I looked them up on LinkedIn, they had no profile photo. They had a first and last name, their title, their present job, no description of their job, no previous work history, no images, no articles written, nothing like that. And to me, that's like on the internet walking around with a bag on your head, a networking function. So when I Google you or I look you up on LinkedIn, or if your Facebook profile is locked down and hidden, I start to wonder, what is this person like in real life? Maybe they're so different in real life than they are in business that they're hiding something. Or, hey, they're not willing to share who they are, so why am I going to reach out and connect with them? And so really, when I Google you, I want to be able to find, this is important as a sales professional, is the first step is, and this is around discovery and consumption, is what do I find? Does it sell? Have you really curated and proactively built your profiles? So in search, this is what shows up. So this is Steve Barish. He is kind of the chief sales officer and founder and CEO of a company called OnRes Systems, which is a reservation software for bed and breakfasts and boutique hotels. So years ago, when Steve, not too many years ago, but a few years back, when Steve and I sat down and we searched for his name, nothing relevant showed up for his business. It was personal hobbies, it was holiday pictures, it was some stuff friends posted of him with funny pictures. And yet, when I'm looking for this CEO that I might do business with or buy software from, it wasn't painting a great picture. So Steve got proactive and he built his LinkedIn profile up. He got active on Twitter. He posted created a YouTube channel, which is actually just one where he reviews and curates lists that his customers would find interesting. And a lot of them are his actual customer locations and videos. Then he started an Instagram profile and he wrote a few reviews on Facebook of his client businesses. But as I digress, what occurs is when you search for Steve Barish, you see what he wants you to see. You see an active guy on social media channels, and any of these links I click on, it paints a picture of his lifestyle and what he does professionally. So it's really important that your social graph is your new business card. That, yeah, sure, you've got a business card still, but the first thing people do when they meet people professionally or even romantically now, they Google us, they look us up on Facebook, they check us out. And so what are you communicating at these profiles? So let's talk about being discoverable quickly. And this is I'm kind of crossing. I know some of the people on here are purely in sales. There's some people on this webinar today who probably are still responsible for marketing or in a senior management or ownership position. So some of these ideas will relate to different people, but being discoverable, you want to make sure your Google Places listing is built out properly with images, photos, all the relevant context, so that when I pick up this mobile device here and I search for CRM software in Vancouver, what happens is any mobile device, a lot of the search results are driven by local listings. And so Yelp, search engine optimization is still a huge lead gen opportunity and discovery opportunity for me. All major social media profiles, making sure they're built out properly. Guest blogging and or writing for other people, press releases, writing reviews on various websites, and then capitalizing on trending topics. So an example of capitalizing on trending topics is an example I gave earlier, where the Salesforce.com conference, or maybe the CPSA's sales chat on Twitter. If you want to connect with other salespeople, the upcoming sales chat would be brilliant for that. And so by just following that hashtag for that Twitter chat, you can connect with a lot of other CPSA members across Canada. So these are all examples of being discoverable. And if you want to be discovered by other CPSA members, then use the hashtag, get involved in the chat, for example. So, like I said, discovery can be Google Places or Yelp reviews, but also another tool that I've been using lately, which has worked really well, in fact, almost too well because I've been busy and not able to meet with all these people that I've connected with, is a tool called Shaper. And Shaper is on Android and on iPhone, and what it does is it connects your LinkedIn profile to it, and then you indicate whether you'd like to go for coffee, whether you'd like to do a video conference, whether you'd like to go for a drink after work, dinner, lunch, breakfast, whatever it may be. And then you put in the keywords of people in your industry that you'd find interesting. So for me, I'm looking for entrepreneurs, consultants, strategists, as well as people in the sales space. And so then what happens is it's kind of like Tinder, if you're familiar with that, Tinder for business. So what happens is you can either click pass or meet. So these profiles, you get a dozen profiles every day. You click pass or meet. And if they click pass or meet as well, because you're in the same region, when they looked at your profile, it creates a match and you can instantly book a meeting with this person. So kind of a cool, another way. So why I share this is that look for tools and new technologies and other opportunities to be discovered by other people. You got to put yourself out there. So Shaper, give it a shot. It's free. So here's the next step around social selling, is that it's really important is that what social selling also enables us to do is in the past, we had to send emails to everybody in order to get their attention. And we still do that, but as we know, anybody who's using email marketing knows that open rates are dropping and dropping. So another method of nurturing and adding value on an ongoing basis is by posting good content and interacting. And the impact of socially posting good content and proactively interacting with our prospects on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, wherever else we might be, is that it garners much better results from a return on investment perspective. So a nudist group did a study and found that nurtured leads, which is what that is ongoing value-added contact proactively, make 47% larger purchases than non-nurtured leads. And so it's really, really important that we have an ongoing content curation, creation, and outreach strategy with our connections. So if you're thinking, what kind of content can I actually create as a sales pro? My suggestions are, number one, frequently asked questions. Behind the scenes. So I've got a car dealer, and all he does, actually a sales guy at a car dealership, he never talks about his cars. He talks about what's going on in the dealership and what he goes through and who he meets and what's happening and the community stuff they're doing and renovations and all this kind of stuff. And it's humanized him so much, and it's kind of endeared him to his network that his biggest source of referrals are actually second-degree connections, friends of his friends. So industry insights and infographics are great things to share. Roundups. So hey, top 5 articles I read that I think you'd find interesting. Interviews with local or regional influencers, customer success stories, how-tos, top 10 lists. And so, top 10 things to do to prepare for sailing in the Christmas season, or top 10 sales tools that you may find interesting or useful. Or maybe you're in real estate and you're selling to commercial clients, and it might be top 10 things to think about when evaluating a commercial property's viability. So these are examples of content ideas, but again, a lot of this stuff is already available out there. And a lot of the times, if you generate these ideas, your marketing team may be able to put something together or supply something to you, or repurpose something that's already used by various industry associations. So not all this has to be written by you. These are great content ideas you can use to even find and share. So curation. So I talked about curating content, and one of the things we can do, I like to use Twitter lists and trending hashtags. So you can use your own Twitter lists, or you can find experts in your industry, authors, journalists, click on their profile. Most of them have created lists, and lists of people that they like to follow who are leaders in the industry. And if you can follow those lists, often there's constant updates of relevant information that you can share with your connections. Google alerts for keywords, client content from their social channels. So one of the things that I found has really worked is if I have clients that are active on social media sharing their content, I share my client's content with my audience. Now, if it's not relevant for my audience, I won't, but in most cases, there is some relevance. And what happens is this builds a positive equity with those clients. They start to see that, hey, not only is this person trying to pitch stuff to me, he or she is actually interested in my success and wants to share the content we've created. So other curation ideas are obviously sharing industry or regional association content, CEO newsletters. So I'm subscribed to a lot of newsletters from different CEOs and industries I work in, and I find all kinds of great insights in there that I can share with my other clients. trending local news, or even voice of customers. So I've got certain clients that actually, when a client is ecstatic about the work they've done for them, they'll actually ask them for a quick video interview or a testimonial that goes out onto their social platforms and channels. So these are curation ideas. So here's an example here. I talked about him just earlier. Is Darcy Campbell, before he got onto Facebook and used it as a sales tool, and he only really uses sales of Facebook, he was selling 13 cars a month at a Ford dealership in Halifax, Nova Scotia. When he went from that to storytelling on Facebook, where daily he talks about, you know what, this one on the right here is a Special Olympics ride and drive fundraiser they're doing. The one in the middle was him washing his car. He's actually got him and his lady here on the left actually have a new child now, and so the recent update was about the Mustang going away and a family vehicle being purchased at the dealership. So he's just telling his story, but what happens is everybody that he's connected with knows what he does and his approach to business, and so he gets so many referrals from those people. So a lot of people that know him haven't bought a vehicle from him, but their friends have. They've become a great referral source. And by doing this, he went from selling 13 to 25 cars a month. So conversation. Here's an example. I saw this guy on Twitter tweeting about their entrepreneurship summit. And I thought this would be an interesting summit to speak at. And so I went on the profile on Twitter because I have an alert that anytime on Twitter someone tweets conference, and it's in Vancouver, I'm notified. So he tweeted about his upcoming conference. I favorited it. I retweeted it, shared it with my audience. That I did 3 of them over a short period of time, and then he reached out to me and said, "Hey, thanks a lot for the shout-outs. I'd love to connect and talk to you." And I reached out to him. We booked a time. We connected on the phone, and away you go. And there's another opportunity. So that conversation was actually started. He discovered me by me discovering him and interacting with his content. Then a conversation started, and then an opportunity was created. So these are the approach that I'm talking about. It's not automated, 100% automated. It's not blasting all of the internet. It's not sending the same spammy direct message to all your LinkedIn or Twitter connections. It's actually relevant, customized interactions. And that, you don't need too many of those on a daily basis to actually create quite a sales funnel. So here's something else that's interesting. Brand engagement leads to brand loyalty. Nearly half of all respondents, 46.7%, indicated that a personalized response from a brand would strengthen their brand loyalty. So that's a really interesting insight. So 46.7% indicate that personalized response, not generic and automated, but a genuine human outreach, significantly increases brand loyalty. Here's something else that's interesting. 86% of respondents making over $150,000 a year were more likely to be more loyal to a brand that engage them on social media. So there was a misconception, and I've heard this over the years, oh, my affluent market doesn't actually use social media. They do. In fact, it really, really impacts their brand loyalty if we engage them. So it's not just about, and why I bring this up, brand loyalty is it's not just about getting the lead. Social selling is actually about getting the lead and then growing the relationship. So it's about that value-added content and interaction continues after you land the client as well using these platforms. So here's a quick example. Peter Aceto, who was the CEO of ING Direct, basically the founding CEO of ING Direct here in Canada, which is an organization with $60 billion of assets under management. They were then purchased by Scotiabank, of course, most recently, or Bank of Montreal or Scotiabank, I believe, and then were rebranded as Tangerine. And Peter has since, in the last year, semi-retired from the banking business. But it was really interesting is how I met Peter was a number of years ago. I just actually was watching him on Twitter, liked it, talked about what he's doing on Twitter on a podcast interview, and then I tweeted him a link and she said, "Hey, Peter, I used you as an example of a good CEO tweeter in this interview." He said, "Hey, great podcast. Thank you. I'll keep tweeting and listening." And then he actually subscribed to the podcast. He also followed me on Twitter. And then we began to retweet and share each other's content. Well, we went and interacted a number of times, and eventually I personally messaged him and said, "Hey, Peter, I'm coming out to Toronto. I'd love to interview you for a book I'm working on." And so my co-author and I actually met with Peter. He said yes, to my surprise at that time, as CEO of a bank. We went for dinner, built a great relationship. He ended up in our book. He then eventually financially invested in a couple conferences we were doing in Vancouver. He actually had me come into his local office and work with some of his people. And then more recently, when he launched his book a little over a year and a half ago, he actually had me host his event where he did his book launch and interview him. And there's even a picture of him and I here hiking the Gross Grind at Gross Mountain the morning before the book launch. And so why I share this is this personal and business relationship all evolved because I reached out personally, interacted, began to continue and build dialogue over time, and then eventually it moved into consent to first meet and interview him, and then that relationship grew as it does. He ended the sales or relationship funnel. But what's interesting is this isn't really about return on investment. This is about return on relationship. And I think if you can start thinking about the aspect of return on relationship, what happens when I build really valued relationship with my online connections? So I think this is an example, and I think that too many people are so busy hitting their numbers all day and sending out spammy pitch messages that they forget there's a person behind that computer and that you can really build some strong relationships and establish that rapport. So I'm going to share with you my 9 rules of engagement that Steve Jagger and I developed when we wrote Sociable. I covered most of these, so I'm going to go through them pretty quick, but I want you to think about these because this is what I find most people don't mess up in social selling because they don't know how to use LinkedIn or Twitter features or Facebook features. They do it because they do it with the wrong intent and the wrong strategy. So here's some thoughts on engaging. Number 1, stop pitching and start connecting. Resist the temptation to connect on LinkedIn and immediately send a pitch. Think about how Peter Aceto and I developed our relationship, or how Darcy at the car dealership used storytelling to develop leads. So add value versus pitching. Number 2, doers win in the game of social media. So none of Darcy's updates are brilliant. Most of them are just very approachable, real life, basic storytelling, but he does it consistently. And that's how he's winning, is he's getting involved and doing it daily. Number 3, it's not about you. So, I see so many realtors, and what are they doing on Facebook? They're posting their new listings daily ad nauseum. Now, what occurs is that most of us are going to buy a house about once every 4 years. So for the rest of the 4 years, are you going to actually follow this person's updates of their ongoing house sales? No. What you're going to do is you're going to stay connected because you're polite, but you're going to mute them so you never see their updates again. And when you're ready to buy a house, you won't think of them because you've muted them and you haven't seen an update from them for 4 years. So that realtor needs to think about the fact that they need to be writing updates that are of value to their audience all year round, for not on that 1 week they're looking for a house, if they want to keep their connections. So think about how that translates to us. So talk less about what products you're selling and talk more about how you can help other people. That's the content you share, it's the conversations you have. Number 4, be fearless in your contribution to community. And this is a really key piece. Is, for me, I had people say, Shane, you can't do these podcasts that are 30 minutes long telling people how to close deals, because then no one's going to hire you. They're going to use your information for free. They're just going to use your free information. But actually, the more content I've given, the more time I make for other people, the more responsive I am on Twitter, especially compared to my competitors, the more business and relationships I've generated. Number 5, don't be a social spammer. Engage and focus on your nano tribes. So resist the temptation to send blanket messages to 1,000 people on LinkedIn. Instead, segment your message based upon what audience you're dealing with. Number 6, be authentic. And why I say be authentic is that you don't really have a choice. So if you don't want a picture of you, at a conference dancing on a table with a lampshade on your head, then stop dancing on a table with a lampshade on your head. Because the reality is that around you are 200 people with cameras on their phones, and it'll hit the internet. The same thing goes for the way you operate in your business, though. Is if you profess to be an awesome employer, for instance, but you don't onboard your employees properly, you don't treat them well, you don't follow through on your engagements, and you're constantly changing direction of the company, expect that to end up on Glassdoor or Indeed as a rating of your organization. But the same goes as a sales professional. If you're out there and you're closing deals and you're doing things and you're promoting one thing on the internet and you're behaving another way personally, expect that to end up on the internet. And so be authentic, because we really don't have a choice today. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but it means you have to be real and you have to be responsive. Number 7, be consistent. So consistently being present on LinkedIn is more important than posting a brilliant article once a month. I'd rather see you actually just share good content from other people and be interactive every day, because that's one of the key attributes of success from the study we did of social salespeople across Canada, is those people that were on social media, using it for business, at least once a day, if not 3 to 5 times a day, were more likely to meet or exceed quota because of their consistent activity. Number 8, amplify through community. So it doesn't matter that you'll never have 3 or 4 or 5,000 LinkedIn connections. If you only ever have 200, but those connections have a ton of value-added connections and they're credible, it opens the door for you. So those second-degree connections are vital. And number 9 is get sociable. And this is really important. How Steve and I defined sociable many years ago, and I still talk about it today, is getting sociable is about using the internet to get off the internet, or at least moving from light interactions like 140 characters or 280 characters on Twitter to a phone call, to a Skype call, to a personal interaction or an in-person meeting. And once you deepen that relationship, then all of your content means more to them on the internet from now on. And it also is in person, face-to-face, or even via video, is when deals get real, or we've discovered they're not a real prospect. And so it's really important is that it's not a video game. It's not about collecting LinkedIn connections and Twitter connections and how many leads you get. It's how many of them have you met in person or deepened your engagement with. So, collaboration. This is another big one. So one of the things you can do is, I had an opportunity to connect with 14 other sales professionals who were somewhat competitive with me, because we're all sales authors and sales trainers. So we're kind of the sales professionals. So we're out there pitching. And we're also competing for business in many cases at conferences and book sales and whatnot. So the first thought would be, I don't want to collaborate with these people because we're going to steal business from each other. What we did instead is we formed a collaborative network, kind of a co-opetition versus competition. And there was 40 of us, that it grew to eventually 40 of us. We started with 14. What we agreed that when I would write a blog post or released a book or did a video or a podcast or even like a webinar like this, that the other authors would tweet it and share that information to LinkedIn. And then we also started interviewing each other and cross-posting each other's blogs. This grew to 40. And so whenever I do a blog post, they share my content, and whenever they do one, I share theirs. So it means, I probably share 10 to 12 pieces of content a day, but it doesn't take much time. But here's what happens is I went from having a reach of 30,000 Twitter followers to an online reach of 12 million collectively between these 40 authors. So what also occurred is it's generated me business in all parts of the world I'd never have. I've generated business for them. And so think about, are there even just 2 or 3 people in your local market where they could agree to share your content and vice versa, where you create this relationship where you begin to share content, insights, and leads. And so this, when I became one of the top 30 social sales influencers in the world listed by Forbes, really all it was that I had this network of 40 people that I'm connected with that all agreed to share content and help each other. And so think, is there ways for you to collaborate with other people to build a bigger audience or a bigger net? So another way when we look at being discoverable is partnering. So there's an organization called Soho Business Group, and you might have an area of expertise that might be beneficial to a person with a large Facebook page in your city or your market. And so what I agreed to do is for Soho Business Group is to do a live broadcast, much like I'm doing now, but through Facebook Live off my computer. I do it with a free software. It's super easy. And I was able to, they invited me on to talk about growing your business with social selling. They've got several thousand Facebook fans. And what enabled me to do is they got to add value to their audience, but then I got to connect and get in front of a new audience and generated actually some business and leads for me and also value for them. So, it might not be a Facebook Live broadcast, but is there a way through your expertise as a sales professional, your knowledge of your industry, to actually provide content, interviews, insights, blog posts to organizations in your community collaboratively, for instance? So this is kind of what I'm going to wrap up with here, is trigger event spotting, and then also talking about something called relationship, proximity of relationship. And I think this is really important, two key pieces. So why social search is important to you as a sales professional is to help you identify leads, not to keep score. You don't post a blog post and say, oh, look, 12 people liked my blog post on LinkedIn. I'm doing awesome. Instead is, hey, who are those 12 people? Are they all connected with me? Now that they've liked my update, I have actually a conversation starter. Hey, notice that you dropped by my article. You liked it. I checked out your business, found it very interesting, hoping we can connect. And just by doing that, all of a sudden, you can grow your network and start dialogue, for instance. But here's some other things. So this is an example. Let's say that I ran, maybe I work in sales for a boutique hotel in Whistler. So even on Instagram, I can search for Nicholas North Golf Course, and it would show me anybody who's visiting the golf course that day who's posted photos. And I can actually follow them, connect, interact, ask them questions, maybe even invite them down for a cocktail at the lounge of my hotel so they can visit it and see it. I might search for the Blackcomb hashtag, which is a ski hill in Whistler, if you're not aware of that, and see who's visiting that mountain that day and posting photos, follow and interact with them, or search for the general Whistler hashtag. But the whole key factor is that you can begin to build a list of people who interact in your immediate community or based upon a hashtag and build these relationships. And so if you're not using location and hashtag search in Instagram and proactively yourself interacting with these people, you're kind of missing probably 80% of the opportunity on the platform. Twitter search, again, I talked about this already. It works the same way, so I won't get into too much detail. But the whole factor is that just by a quick search, you can identify. This one is for very different topic, the Ponoka Stampede. And I was actually doing a seminar for a group of tourism and hospitality marketers talking about how they would identify people in their community who are engaged in tourism, in the tourism industry, or in specific verticals of the tourism industry. And so one of the ideas was to search for people who attended or were involved in the local stampede who could also attend their event. And so this was for a conference organizer. So also now on LinkedIn, the other opportunity is to look for triggers. So whenever a shift happens in my network, often there's an opportunity. So I look for who's got a promotion. Don't just congratulate them. Think about how could that promotion create an opportunity for you. Who's left their job? Why do I want to know who left their job? Because I want to see who replaced them. Because that new person, number one, might be a new opportunity if the old person that left hasn't done business with me. Or if my buyer has left, then I need to get in there and connect with the new person quickly. A press release from their company on LinkedIn also is a trigger for an opportunity. A recent article they wrote is a good time to interact with them. An increase in hiring. So one of the things I do is I visit a lot of my prospective clients' business pages, and LinkedIn, if you've got a LinkedIn premium profile, will actually tell you who's recently hired, who they've hired, and what departments. And that can tell you a lot about how you might approach that company. A significant work anniversary or a lot of profile updates. If someone's done a lot of profile updates, I know they might be looking for a job. And so what I'm going to do is then go in and interact with them, see how things are doing, and kind of it helps me in advance understand where they're moving. If they're a client, I kind of can be prepared for the new person coming in, or maybe even it's my turn to help out, reach and help them out, which will build a stronger relationship and create more opportunities in the future, for instance. So the last piece I'm going to talk about is social proximity. And so I've already kind of talked about this a fair bit, and the fact that Darcy's biggest form of referrals weren't his first-degree connections with the people they knew. But also, as you're looking for leads, one of the best things to do, in my opinion, for instance, on LinkedIn, is let's say, for instance, that I'm looking for people who are in the events business in Toronto because I want to speak at conferences in Toronto, which I do. Love to speak in some more conferences in Toronto. And so I'll search for second-degree connections in Toronto who are in the events and services industry. This gave me 631 people in Toronto I could connect with who are second-degree connections. So we have a mutual friend or business associate in common. Then I'll find the ones that I think are relevant to me and my business, and then what I'll do is I won't reach out to them directly. I'll actually reach out to their mutual connection we have. And, for instance, one of these here, most of them we've got, 80 or 50 or 20 mutual connections. I'll find the connection that I have the most rapport with and say, hey, Ruplan, I noticed you're connected with Chris Tampin, and I'd love an opportunity to possibly do some work with them. Would you mind making a quick introduction on LinkedIn? And in most cases, people will say yes, if you've got credibility and you've done business with them. And so this social proximity, these second-degree connections are really vital. So one thing, actually I'm doing my webinar here in the morning. A quick thank you to Ballantine Media, who's a client and a collaborative agency that I work with in Vancouver here. They've actually hosted me today to do my webinar from their office, as mine has a lot of construction going on outside. So I know you wouldn't want to hear jackhammers for this webinar. So a quick thank you to Ballantine Media for this. Then, of course, I use the example of social proximity and Facebook. So friends of my friends that work at Shell. So if I want to do business with Shell Oil, I can find all the second-degree connections I have that know people I know that also work at Shell, look at the relevant ones, and ask for introductions again. So how do we organize this? So one of my suggestions is you want to organize it, and ideally you want to use a CRM that's a social CRM. And so I use one called Nimble. And a couple things I love about Nimble is, number one, if I'm on this person's LinkedIn profile, Austin Nairn, and I just click the little Nimble Anywhere button on Chrome, it actually pulls out all the data they have in their database. They say this person has this Twitter connection, and they have it already associated in their database with the Facebook, their Google+, their LinkedIn connection, pull all the data out for me. I press one button and it adds them to my CRM for me, which is fantastic. In addition to that, the other thing Nimble does, and we talked about, is it actually tracks email opens as a CRM. So this CRM will actually, if I email you today a proposal, for instance, after we've interacted, or a white paper, and you read it once and then I never hear from you again, but 2 months later you open it again, I can actually call you because I've been notified and say, hey, Mike, I noticed, or I might just say, hey, Mike, I've been thinking about you, wondering if you're ready to talk about what I sent through to you a couple months ago. And Mike will go, that's strange because I was just thinking of you today. Say, hey, fantastic. And so what occurs is, for me, I can track opens of emails, opens of proposals, and it really is a great way to, I know he's actually reading my white paper right now. This is probably a good time to call him because he's sitting at his desk and he's actually focused on the topic I want to talk to him about. So use a CRM, a social CRM, that pulls data in on a regular basis. You don't have to update your CRM with your last Twitter conversation because it's already recorded it. You don't have to update your last email interaction because it's already recorded it for you. So whether it's Nimble or it's Salesforce enabled with a social CRM, you need something to organize all this to make sure all this activity from social media doesn't just get lost. So following up, wrapping up here, and then we've got questions, about 10 minutes for questions, is focus on the new sales funnel. So think about the fact that you need to walk through these steps of building consent. Work leads through social proximity. Community plus content plus conversations is your magic formula for pulling leads towards you and establishing yourself as a thought leader. Use a social CRM like Nimble and devote the time for daily disciplines. Remember that in the CPSA survey we did across the country, that those sales professionals who were active on social media multiple times a day for business, not for personal, were more likely to meet or exceed quota than sales professionals that didn't. And in fact, from a CRM perspective, a majority of sales professionals use a CRM. But of those sales professionals that don't use a CRM, over 50% of them actually missed quota. So to give you an idea. So I'm going to wrap up here on this and open up now for questions, which I think Ruplan is going to, I believe, share these questions that have popped up with us, and I'll do my best to answer them. We've got 8 minutes.
Perfect. Yeah. So if you guys could please have a look at the questions bar within your dashboard. If you choose to send any emails at all or any questions at all, please feel free, and I'll try my best to send them over to Shane to answer them. But we do have one here. Is it better to use your social selling, to do your social selling through your company accounts or a combination of both? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. And here's what I'd say is that people buy from people. And so your business accounts add credibility. You need a business Twitter account, a company Twitter account to often put up branded content. CPSA, for instance, would post would then share that content through their own Twitter handle or their own LinkedIn profile. So it's not an either or. It's a good question. It's actually a both. And in fact, I think that, when people have, and the other thing is that people will say, okay, well, I've got a Facebook profile for personal and one for business. And the one for business, I'm just going to post business stuff. Well, realize that most people won't interact with it. The people want to get to know you. They want to know your personal story. And so at this point, your personal brand of you has to do with your lifestyle, your behavior, your attitudes, what you're up to. And so, when you decide you're going to be into social selling, there is a certain level of transparency that is required. I wouldn't suggest having, for instance, 2 different accounts in that way. But yeah, I would definitely suggest building your own personal profile. And because even I have a Sales Academy account, our family business, Knowledge Brokers, had a Twitter account. I did the same thing on all 3 accounts, but my personal Twitter account grew like crazy. People want to connect with people. It's a good question. So I see there's another question here. You want to read that one out? Yeah.
How do you feel about using paid social media advertising to reach B2B clients, Facebook, Google ads?
I think paid, it's another way of discoverability, right? The first step is being discovered. And so the free way to get discovered is good search engine optimization and sharing great content and building network and working with other influencers. But also sometimes, you might not have a year, the luxury of a year to build up enough Twitter followers to really create a large enough footprint to be discovered. And so advertising helps stimulate that. So, I would say it's not an either or, but it definitely works great. I mean, Facebook ads for me helped me fill events. They targeted, like for instance, the professional sales certificate program I run at Langara College, one of the things we do is we run targeted Facebook ads to people who are fans of Oracle CRM and Salesforce.com and all the major sales tools that people use who are in Canada. And so that generates us a lot of attendees. And so, yeah, definitely, as long as you're good at making sure you're speaking to the relevant audience with the right ad copy, it can be a really effective tool. I found that your cost per acquisition for a Facebook lead is actually a lot lower than Google Ads and even Twitter. LinkedIn is great, but it's very expensive. So unless you're selling a high-ticket item, it's going to be pretty difficult to get your ROI on those ads. So good question.
Another one here, how much time is a healthy amount of time to be on the internet daily for business purposes?
I think that you could spend all day on the internet for business purposes daily, depending upon your job, your strategy, and what you're doing, right? So when I started off, I wasn't using social media, blogging, Twitter, podcasting, all that stuff as much as I do now. I started off by doing a blog post a month and popping on Twitter, mostly out of curiosity, every couple of days. But then as my return on investment grew, I realized that, shoot, the time I'm putting into these tools pay a lot more in the short term and the long term than pays than the networking events I'm going to. So I started shifting my energy more and more towards social. But here's what I'd say, is that you want to have a set of daily goals and activities. So for me, there's, I do 7 different types of updates on Twitter, which take me a total of maybe 10 minutes a day at this point. Then I answer and interact with questions. It might take me another 10. I share a major post on LinkedIn. My CRM tells me which clients I'm supposed to reach out to on LinkedIn or Twitter to proactively touch. But the whole point is that you can do a lot of damage in like 2 20-minute slots a day on social media. And then once you establish return on investment, then you might be able to scale some of the activities that work. But I would suggest that 40 minutes to an hour a day is a really good investment initially, but then as you begin to optimize that process, you might find that it's working a lot better for you than the phone or other activities, and you can scale it after that. So, next question.
I think we have, enough time for one more. This is a good question. I'm in my 50s and have not grown up with all of this technology. I've always maintained that social media takes too much time. How do you learn all of these platforms effectively?
So I would say that you don't need to learn all the platforms, but I would definitely start with one and get good at it. Depending upon your marketplace, if you're a business consumer type market or salesperson, then you're going to think about a Facebook business page and a personal Facebook profile, maybe an Instagram account is a good way to start. And so if you're business to business, then you want to look at LinkedIn for sure, and possibly Twitter. But you know, it's all about not time, it's about what those key daily disciplines are that you have scheduled in. So, you know, I'm going to take a look at my top 20 prospects and my top 20 clients each week, and I'm going to reach out to each of them on LinkedIn if appropriate. I'm going to post one piece of relevant content a day. And I mean, if you're in a business and you're a sales professional, you should be reading daily articles online about your industry and what's happening. And you should be able to find at least one article a day you can share. And maybe once a week, you might even write 200 words on a certain area of advice you'd like to give, post it to LinkedIn as a post. So you can start moderate, doesn't have to be a ton, but definitely I would suggest, again, focusing on one platform and learning it well. And then once you start to see your ROI and feel more comfortable, your return on investment, then maybe expand it to other platforms. But I mean, what I like about being in your 50s or your 40s and starting on social media versus maybe being, one of the things I see in companies is they'll say, well, let's hire a young person who knows Twitter to run our corporate brand or go out there and find leads. But the problem with that is you've set this person up for failure unless you've trained them in the business insights and expertise of the industry, because they can't, you're allowing this person to go out and talk to CEOs of companies that you'd like to do business with, but would you ask them to go to their office and meet with them in their boardroom? If the answer is no, then, you know, it doesn't mean you can't hire a young person to do this, but you've got to train them and develop them. So the advantage you have if you're 40 or 50 with a lot of business experience is that you already have the knowledge, you just have to start using the platform to communicate it. So books, there's not a good or bad either way, but what I'm saying is don't let the fact that you're 50 hold you back from getting engaged. You have a lot of knowledge, and if you can leverage that through a platform like LinkedIn, you're no longer going to be your own best kept secret. So I think this kind of wraps us up, Rupland, isn't it? That's about it for questions today.
Yeah, that's good for questions. None received from the last one, so I think that's good to go. Thank you so much, Shane. Of course, on behalf of the CPSA, thank you so much, Shane, and our audience for attending today's webinar. Please, should you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact us at salessuccess@cpsa.com, as well as Shane has so gratefully provided his email address on the screen that you have in front of you. And for those of you who would like a video copy of this webinar, please stay tuned. This will be emailed to you shortly. And please don't forget to download the PDF file under handouts in your dashboard as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. Shane, have the best day today.
Hey, thanks a lot, Rupland. Thanks a lot for inviting me in to speak to the CPSA membership. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.